It was the last night of winter break, and for once, the streets were silent under the weight of heavy snow. I hadn't seen Annie in months, and the idea of spending a quiet weekend together felt like a blessing. We'd grown up side by side, inseparable since grade school, but something shifted when she moved to the city last summer. We were supposed to be forever friends, but now, every call, every text, every visit felt more like a forced obligation than something we actually wanted. The cabin was ours, at least for the weekend. My parents had taken my younger brother to the mountains, leaving me in charge. Annie loved the snow, or at least she used to. I'd imagined us spending hours sledding, laughing, then retreating inside to warm up by the fire with hot chocolate and talk about old times. But from the moment she arrived, things felt off. She had this edge to her now, as if the world owed her something. She seemed annoyed by the sight of our small town, with its quiet streets and the sleepy cabins lining the woods. I tried to talk to her, but all she wanted to do was scroll through her phone, sighing at messages from new friends who lived hundreds of miles away. "I can't believe there's no signal out here," she muttered after dinner, tapping her screen in frustration. I laughed awkwardly, hoping it would lighten the mood. "That's the point, right? No distractions. Just us." She looked up at me with a half smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, just us." The tension grew as the hours passed. When the snowstorm kicked up after midnight, the wind howling like some unearthly beast outside, it felt like even nature was conspiring to trap us in this uncomfortable silence. By the fire, we sat wrapped in blankets, sipping cocoa, but instead of talking about old times, we just sat. I tried to bring up our favorite memories, the time we built a snow fort big enough to crawl inside, the epic sleepovers we used to have, but Annie's responses were clipped, like she didn't care anymore. And maybe she didn't. I went to bed early, pretending I was tired, but really, I just wanted to escape. As I lay under my covers, staring at the ceiling, I thought about the last few months, how I'd clung to the idea that Annie and I were still best friends, even though we'd grown apart. I thought about the way she'd brush me off in texts, how she'd cancel plans last minute for something more important, how she barely seemed to care when I tried to tell her about my life. The truth I'd been avoiding for so long settled heavily on my chest. I was holding on to a friendship that no longer existed. I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I knew, I heard footsteps downstairs. I groggily got up and tiptoed to the living room. Annie was standing by the door, bundled up in her coat, boots laced, holding her phone up like it was a lifeline. "What are you doing?" I asked. She didn't look at me. I can't stay here, okay? I'm going to find service so I can call my friend. They're having a party in the city tonight, and I need to go." My heart sank. She was leaving, ditching me in the middle of a snowstorm to be with people who were more exciting, more important. "Are you serious? In this weather?" "Yeah. I'm serious." I didn't know whether to feel hurt or angry, so I ended up feeling both. "You could get stuck out there, Annie. It's dangerous." "I'll be fine," she said, her voice flat. "I've done worse." I wanted to scream, to beg her to stay, but instead, I just stood there, numb. I watched her open the door, watched the cold wind whip snowflakes into the cabin, and watched her leave without looking back. The silence after she left was deafening. That night, I learned the truth I hadn't been willing to face. Sometimes, friendships drift apart, no matter how much you want to hold on to them. People grow and change, and sometimes they leave you behind. I stayed up all night, sitting by the fire, thinking about the years I spent pretending everything was fine, when deep down, I knew it wasn't. I'd been holding on to a memory of Annie that no longer existed, trying to force us into roles we'd outgrown. By morning, the storm had passed, but the world outside was still buried under snow. I don't know what happened to Annie that night, whether she made it to her party, whether she got stuck on the icy roads, but I knew that when spring came, I'd be ready to let her go. Sometimes, the hardest lesson in life is learning when to walk away. But that morning, as I stood by the window, watching the world slowly thaw under the pale winter sun, I realized that letting go was the only way to move forward. And I was ready. Moral lesson. Friendships, like the seasons, change. Sometimes they drift apart, and as painful as it may be, clinging to the past only delays your own growth. Learning to let go isn't about giving up, it's about understanding that change is inevitable, and walking away with grace is often the only way to move forward. Embracing that truth allows you to heal and make room for new connections that fit the person you've become.